Welcome to 13 Buildings Children Should Know. 13 buildings children should know. Let's get this started with. Alright, first off, we have the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, firstly, the Great Pyramid of Giza, this is just a drawing of it. It actually is just a pyramid, too. Back then, it was this smooth, and the top was... top layer was actually full of gold. It was coated with gold, and then the bottom layer was coated with all this sort of I believe it was ivory, either that or some other kind of valuable material as well. Nowadays, it's just stepping stones, and the Sphinx here is lost its nose. Lots of people actually kind of wonder what all this was for, and people thought mainly it was for tombs. Other people thought it was a ritual area, and others thought that it was an alien place, or astronomers. You'll figure out what that alien part meant later on in the video. Speaking of which, I've actually been to the pyramid myself. Look, here's proof. These are the Great Pyramids of Giza, where I was, and here's the Sphinx, and me petting it. Oh yeah, and here's a photo of the hotel, of the Airbnb that we were staying at while we were in Egypt. Now here's what the inner layer actually looks like. This is where the entrance was supposed to be. This is a secondary entrance, and here is a stone where it's blocking off the entrance, just in case people try to actually get in. Here are some of the lower chambers where you went ahead. It was a subterranean chamber, and this was the Queen's Chamber. This is the Grand Gallery. Not sure what they needed to showcase, but then again, before the tomb robbers got into this place, there was a bunch of things to showcase. Here's the King's Chamber. Basically means this is where the tomb was held. Here are some of the places where we went ahead and made the weight-relieving chambers, and all these 9s that are written here, those are all shafts that were used to go ahead and help build the interior of the pyramid too. People actually have thought of ways that people could have made this, like 20,000 people could have made this without any modern technology. Back then, people thought that they probably used ramps, which is the most likely solution, and there's been recent evidence that shows that it's the most likely solution too. Another way was that yes, it's also a ramp, but in this case, it just went ahead and did this. It's created by the stones, and then people took the stones out one by one and helped create this pyramid so that there's nothing left of the ramp behind for us to see. While others, well, this is also possible, but not that likely. And others just think it's just a bunch of aliens who made this pyramid in Egypt for no apparent reason. Some sort of alien goes ahead, has this alien battle, and then some sort of transporter goes wrong and sends them to this ancient alien civilization on Earth, and this guy's like, why did you send us to Egypt? And he's all like, this isn't Egypt, this is obviously Tetraman work. Lol, you probably get that reference if you watch cartoons. Alright, and one of the main reasons why it isn't really that smooth anymore, the reason why it's still a little bit of a step pyramid nowadays, is because, well, some of the robbers, after taking away all that gold and silver or ivory, whatever it was, went ahead and took some of the bricks out and used those bricks to go ahead and build their own houses. What a brilliant way to steal your house. It's like, it reminds me of money laundering, where you go ahead, you make your own money, and then you trade it for real money, and now you've got a stack of real money to actually spend on. And well, this just feels like it, like you create these kind of fake money and then you use it to build your own things to make it legit. Well, that's just the most classic way I can think of to go ahead and make up something. Next up, we have the Parthenon. The Parthenon, I've actually been there before they actually closed it nowadays because due to well, heat. Here, well, this is actually supposed to be part of the Parthenon. This is definitely the Pantheon. This is part of the Pantheon, and then we went ahead into the Parthenon. It's a colorful temple, and it's just one of them too. The columns here are actually thicker than the rest of the columns in the back, because the way the sun goes ahead and lights them. The sun makes them, well, look thinner than they actually are, so all the columns from here all the way to the back look exactly the same size, even though they actually aren't. And of course, instead of paintings, they had statue paintings too. They chiseled out the people instead of actually using paint to go ahead and paint them all too. I'm not sure paint even existed back then, at least the way they did today. Here they definitely have paintings, alright, but it wasn't exactly the way they had nowadays. There were also 3 types of columns that existed: the Doric columns, the Ionic columns, and the Corinthian columns. as mentioned, in order of difficulty is creation. Doric columns are just the most simplest columns. It's just a column with like a little top at the end, on the top and the bottom. The Ionic columns are actually the columns with the two little scrolls on the top. And with these scrolls, you can go ahead and do things too. Here, the Corinthium is actually just the most complex kind of thing. It's also the hardest one to make because it has all these leaf patterns on the top all around it. And with those leaf patterns, it becomes one of the more complex columns too. Alright, next up we go to Notre Dame de Paris. Now, I couldn't find any pictures of me going to Notre Dame. I've actually been there before it burnt down, so that was a few years ago. This is me, by the way. However, I did find a picture of me going to Paris. Here's proof. That's the Louvre, and Louvre is in Paris, so I must have went to Notre Dame de Paris. This is actually the most Gothic kind of cathedral you would find anywhere in the world. In fact, it's the one that's actually inspired most of the Gothic cathedrals too. One of the special things about this is that the weight is taken off the wall. The weight on the roof to the walls are actually taken off the walls, and so they can go ahead and create these giant windows, and that's how they actually went ahead and made colorful windows too inside. Here's the thing. There's of course this ground plan, and here's an interesting fact about the Notre Dame. Notre Dame itself, during the French Revolution, if you look down here, you can see exactly 28 of these kings, and I just showed them there. By the way, during the French Revolution, the heads of these statues of the kings, they were all chopped up so that they were all headless. And then they turned the Notre Dame into a wine shop. You heard me right, a wine shop. Thank God they didn't turn it into a bar. Then of course, the French revolutionaries would have destroyed it. Anyways, the fact is, it's just that this was turned into a wine shop during the French Revolution. How extraordinary. And then if it wasn't for Victor Hugo and his book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, people would have probably already demolished the whole thing, and people wouldn't have done a lot of things too. In fact, this place is actually pretty special too. Joan of Arc was condemned to death here. Mary, Queen of Scots, was married here in the cathedral, and Napoleon's coronation also took place in Notre Dame, which is pretty interesting if you ask me. Alright, next up we have this, the Leaning Masterpiece. In fact, it's called the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is very leaning too. When the architect first designed the place, well, if you want a really tall building, you need to figure out how to make. You need to find a place where the floor is sturdy enough to actually support the whole thing too. And then, well, the architect forgot about that, so it went leaning. For the first 3 floors, which are actually underground now, the architect to design them actually went ahead, and then, well, it fell down, and then they kind of, well, chickened out of the project, and the locals decided to stop building it for 100 years. In fact, it went down. Well, when people of Pisa actually started laying the foundations on their company, they actually wanted to build a tallest bell tower in Italy that would actually become their visible signs of wealth and success. And if there was trouble with the neighbors, well, the off at least could take refuge there. It was to be like 100 meters high, but when the building was on a certain level, the laborers had to take to their heels really quickly because it seemed to be sinking in the ground, and people didn't want to get into the ground with it. Now, as I mentioned, if you want to build something so high into the sky, well, you need a firm foundation. The architect forgot about that, and so thin bottom plate and the first 3 floors sank, and then later people stopped doing it for a while, and then they started building it again. Here's technically the floor plan. Here's the actual tower. Here is the actual tower. This is the site. This is the baptistry of the site plan, and this is the cathedral. That's where it's supposed to be. In fact, I've actually been to the Leaning Tower of Pisa myself. I would show proof, but I don't seem to have, at least if I do, I seem to have actually kind of lost it into my history of galleries of photos in the my back days. Next up, we have the Tower of London. No, not Power of London, we have the Tower of London. The Tower of London is like both true and made up. The Tower of London is a perfect fairy tale kind of castle, but it's also a kind of prison. People were actually imprisoned here, and this is more of a prison than an actual castle. That's actually kind of perfect way to describe it, to be honest. There's a lot of things that actually go ahead makes this special place too. In the olden days, the tower was royal palace, and today it holds the most historic weapons and armory. And back then, it also was even a little tower too. It was also a prison, and being sent to the tower often meant death. The first prisoner to actually go ahead were sentenced there, actually managed to escape by smuggling a rope in a wine barrel. After he realized his guards were drunk, he went ahead and sneaked out into the river. Alright, that's actually kind of funny if you ask me. Next up, we have St. Peter's Basilica. St. Peter's Basilica. St. Peter's Basilica is like the cathedral in... Let's see. It's the cathedral in Vatican City, and many famous artists and architects actually worked on this basilica themselves. The whole floor plan itself is also pretty interesting as well. It's supposed to be in front of this square, which is technically a circle, trapezoid leading toward the St. Basilica's cathedral. And afterwards, there are a lot of things inside too. The dome over here, the Christs, and even this Michelangelo statue of Pieta, which of course is Mary, the Virgin Mary, going ahead and well, weeping over Jesus. She's a virgin because God did X with her without any touching. Taj Mahal. If you actually watched any of my old videos from a year ago, you'll know that I've been to the Taj Mahal. Look, here's proof. This is actually the first destination I went to when I went on my technically European tour, my tour of Europe in the summer of 2023. It's actually a tomb for the king who commissioned the wife of the king who commissioned it. He commissioned it after his wife died, and then he made it sure that the Taj Mahal was built. It's right here, by the way. Here is the river. Here is the river. Here is the entrance, and here is the garden. In fact, on the opposite side of the river, he wanted to go ahead and create the black Taj Mahal over here. But then his son actually put him under house arrest, more like palace arrest, because he was put under arrest and put inside the Taj Mahal for the rest of his life because he used up too much money. Wow. Next up, we have Neuschwanstein Castle. Neuschwanstein Castle. Oh, let me write it out real quickly. It's actually one of those kind of royal castles too. In fact, this is a royal home for just 176 days. The guy who built this guy, his name was Ludwig II. He went ahead and built this kind of place. He built it, and today it's still actually kind of unfinished. Its construction time was 15 years, although it is still kind of unfinished. They're going to put a chapel, but then again, they realized no one's ever going to live here again, so they just stopped building it. Now, this gray area was actually completed during the king's lifetime. He became king when he was 18 years old, and this was erected after he died. In fact, funny story about King Ludwig II, he himself was actually kind of mad. He probably gave into the stress of being an 18-year-old king, and so he would sleep during the day, wake up during the night, have imaginary conversations with people from the history, had dinner with them, had breakfast with them, and had weird things with them too. In fact, the whole idea of this whole place, the whole idea of Neuschwanstein Castle is just that he went ahead and used up all the money instead of using it on actual things like foreign affairs or current affairs or the needs of his people. It was terrible at doing that. Alright, next up we have the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower today is something very modern. Lots of people actually go ahead and like the style of it. But back then, people really wanted to go ahead and put something on top of the metal skeleton. They're like, it's just a skeleton. It's nothing useful. And then when the Paris people, who were organizing the World's Fair, basically said, you can't do that. It's too skeleton-y. He's all like, how dare you? In fact, I'll pay with my own money. And in fact, the iron that created the Eiffel Tower actually came from Gustav Eiffel's own tower. Own factory, which is one of the reasons why he built a home right there, up there. And by the way, that little antenna on the top, that's actually added afterwards when people decided, okay, now that the World's Fair over, let's just destroy the Eiffel Tower now. And it's like, wait, it can become a radio station. And they're like, alright, fine. And in World War II, that became one of the most important radio stations ever. Here, of course, there are a few things too. This is the start of construction. This is when the construction was started. You notice that there's none of those arches there, and then later people realized that, hey, maybe it's actually a little too dirty. It's too unconventional and too disgusting. So they went ahead and added those 4 round arches at the bottom later on, just to make it more, at least a bit more beautiful. And nowadays today, well, they're probably gonna take it out on August 11th. It even has the Olympic rings put onto it, but that is very temporary, so that won't be there for long. Next up, we have the Chrysler Building. I actually called it the Chrysler Building so many times, but now I actually call it the Chrysler Building. Interesting fact about the Chrysler Building, the Chrysler Building actually won the competition to become the tallest building in the world by playing a trump card. You see that little kind of spire at the top? Well, back then, the creator, William Van Allen, he and the Bank of Manhattan decided to go ahead, and both decided to go ahead and build the tallest building, but then they had different ideas for the building, so when the Bank of Manhattan said, we finished our building, it's so taller than the Chrysler Building, by really 1 meter, they go ahead and secretly pulled out their 56-meter long spire that was only added that only took a few hours to be added. So the Chrysler Building won. 1 year later, the Empire State Building became the tallest building in the world. La 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 la. Yeah, and of course there are all a bunch of these little things they added there too to make it a bit more family friendly as well. Alright, next up we have the Guggenheim. The Guggenheim Museum is really one of the most interesting museums I've ever been to. Look, here's proof. And here's proof that I went to the Eiffel Tower. We sadly never went to the top. And all you had to do, the Museum of the Guggenheim, is that you take an elevator all the way to the top. Afterwards, you go ahead and walk down in a spiral way towards the ends. In fact, that's actually how the collection is all shown on the spirals. So you could technically make a 360-degree map of it too. Or you could just go walk upwards and then go back downwards in a different way. But I like to take the elevator upwards and then go down spirally. And with that, you can go ahead and have the perfect idea of what the modern art was like too. This is the perfect museum. It was also one of the shortest museums I've ever been to. When I got to the top, I went down. I realized that I've seen everything and I'm like, wait, this is all the art there is? Later I realized there was actually more art, but a little too late too soon. Of course, here's the floor plan. There's a staircase just in case the elevator doesn't work, obviously. The exhibition area is this entire place. There's a glass dome here and a lecture theater down here. If you ever watch Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is Spider-Man Miles Morales Spider-Man #2, you've probably seen the Guggenheim Museum, except the Vulture from Renaissance Vulture went ahead and cut some art in half. Next up, we have the Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House is one of the more interesting opera houses I've ever been to. I've actually been to one of these operas myself, and I will show proof in 1 second. Unfortunately, proof has been lost to time. It's been years since I've been to Australia. Alright, speaking of which, here's the concert hall. This is actually this is the concert hall, and these 2 and 3 here, actually those are the theaters. One of them, I don't remember which one, I've actually been and watched a concert in. And there's of course a foyer here and here. And with that, you can go ahead and make the best of the scene too. Here's the top view, and this is how they went ahead and built it too. They used the orange principle. All these little curves here were actually calculated, thinking of which, if you added all the curves somehow together, you create an orange, or at least a ball. And finally, this is the Beijing National Stadium. I'm living in China, but what I can't believe is I've never been to the Beijing National Stadium. What a shame. Well, someday, I'm gonna have to go there. Preferably before I'm 18. Because then I have to leave China. And here, it's the Beijing National Stadium. Again, this is where the Olympics were hosted as well. In fact, it's the only reason why this was built for the Olympic Stadium. Afterwards, it was supposed to be a soccer match here. It was supposed to be a soccer match here, but then, they realized they didn't have enough seats, so they moved it somewhere else. And then again, they've never used the stadium ever again. Not even once. Even all the tickets of over all the year is not enough to even pay for the maintenance for 1 year for this thing too. So it's darn expensive. I think China's going to have to destroy it sometime soon, and I hope they don't too. People actually called it a bird's nest, but the Italian designers actually didn't think of that. When they actually went ahead and did this. The Switzerland architects didn't actually think of the bird's nest when they started building the stadium. I actually played a video game called 2008 Beijing Sonic and Mario at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. I've actually watched it, and I've watched the opening ceremony, Mario and Sonic style, of course, and it's actually pretty cool. I think I'd watch the 2008 Olympics again. On old YouTube, of course. And it does look a lot like a bird's nest, but how do you keep the rain out? Well, they added that little kind of roof on the top parts. And all these iron pits here that make the nest, they're all welded together. And with that, you have 13 buildings children should know. And one more building that people should know is the Burj Khalifa. At the time of this book was written, the Burj Khalifa was the tallest building in the world, but it wasn't finished. And this is the Burj Khalifa. And the Burj Khalifa, I've actually went to the top myself and I took a few photos of my sunset on my phone. Unfortunately, I didn't send them here. And then here's me going ahead and looking like in the Airbnb just beside the top Burj Khalifa. We've only been there for literally 2 days. And that's it.
3 days.
3 days? We've only been there for 3 days?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And with that, we have 13 buildings children should know. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, shalom, peace. Bye bye. Ba 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 da 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 Olympics da 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 da